All right, I am back, and we're back with Probable Cause Christianity. Another 15 minutes with God here from 8 to 8:15, and again, I will be talking about Revelations, and this is part 4. No matter what the slide says, this is part 4 of my series, and I am starting on the Church of Ephesus. So we're going to start talking about the churches a little bit more, who they were. The places that the church was, and the surrounding communities, etc., just so you can kind of see where they were at and what was going on. So, also, I tend to talk pretty fast, so if anybody needs me to slow down, if I'm talking too fast, please send me a message and let me know that I do talk too fast, or maybe I am talking too slow for you. I think I could probably talk faster. I'm a pretty fast talker. That's according to my wife. So we will move on and let's get started. So the book of Revelations, it is actually part 4. This is a slide I made a while back, so I wasn't sure how it was going to go as far as the 15 minutes and how much I could get in. Apparently I'm ahead of schedule, so that's a good thing. So let's go ahead and get started on that. And my timer is set, and let us begin. So we're going to talk about the Ephesus and what that area was like. Okay, so Revelations 2:1 says, unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write, and Jesus is telling John to write this, these things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands. Okay, so just a second right here. A lampstand is a bearer, not a source of light. Okay, it bears the light. The oil is emblematic of the Holy Spirit. So notice the paradoxical care that they have here, in his hand, yet walking in their midst. Okay, so John 10:28, if you wanted to look at that, it also kind of references some of these things. I'm actually going to let you know here. I'll look it up real quick and let you know when it talks about, in John 10:28, it says, and I gave him eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. So basically, when Jesus has something in his hand, no one can take it from him. I mean, it's there, right? So if he's holding you in his hands, or if he's holding, a church in his hands, no one can take it. The lampstands are the churches, and the flame is the Holy Spirit in these churches. So if you reference other parts of the Bible, when it talks about like the 7 stars in his right hand, or the 7 spirits of the 7 churches, and that is what Jesus has. So that's something that you can look back on and have faith in, that Jesus, if you're in good with Jesus, if you have Jesus in you, if Jesus has you in his hand, he will never let go of you. So you just need to keep that in mind no matter what happens in these days. Jesus has you. If you know Jesus and you love him and you praise him and worship him, and he has you in his hand, he will not let go. Okay, so moving on, Revelations 2, 2 through 3. I know thy works, and he's talking about Ephesus here. He's talking about the church letter, the letter that John writes to the church in Ephesus. I know thy works, and thy labor, and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles, and are not, and hast found them liars, and hast borne, and hast patience, and for my name's sake has labored, and hast not fainted. So Jesus is putting something out to John to give to the churches, that he's telling them, that these things, he sees these things, he knows these things, he knows thy works and thy labor and thy patience. He's basically praising them for the stuff that they do. So when he talks about it, I know thy works. If you look in Matthew 2, 5, 16, 18, it talks about work, labor, and patience. Okay? You also have Thessalonians 1, 3 that kind of talks about that a little bit. The testing of the doctrines, Paul's farewell warning to the apparently heated churches in Acts 20, 25, 31, also 2 Corinthians 11, 14, 15, 1 Thessalonians, John, and then you have John's warnings in 1 John 4, 1 through 3. So when he's talking about this stuff and he's going through this, Jesus is basically saying that he knows thy works. And if you look at, which I'm going to again, if you look at Matthew 6, 2, it says, therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say, they have their reward. Okay? So, in that, Jesus is saying the same thing he's always saying. Right here, he's telling Ephesus, I know thy works. I know what you've been doing. You don't have to tell people about it. You don't have to get praise from other people. The only people you need, or the only person or whatever entity that you would need praise from is God. And he knows what you do because he sees all. So if you look at, say, Matthew, let's see, is it in 5? Yeah. It says, and when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. So basically, don't seek rewards from people here on earth. They're not going to do anything for you. Okay? Nothing is greater than what God can do for you. So he knows your works, and he knows the works of Ephesus and what they have done, and he's acknowledging that. And I'm sure that must have been an amazing, amazing thing to see, knowing that Jesus sees them. And you should know it too. So, okay. Let's look at Ephesus as far as a little bit of background. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go through some things here. Tacitus, he records that the city was founded in 1400 BC. They had an early temple to the mother goddess of ancient Hittite fertility deity, who was subsequently named, or it became Diana. And we'll get into Diana a little bit later. I mean, she was basically a false god, right? So she was a fertility deity who subsequently became identified as Diana. Ionian colonists from Athens, okay, they settled in this area in 1100 BC. And in the middle of the 6th century BC, the Lydians captured the city. Croesus, their king, he was ousted or taken over by the Persians in 541 BC. And Ephesus was joined to other cities by the Ionian Confederation. It was at this time that the tutelary deity became identified with Diana, or Artemis, some say. Ephesus was involved to its own disadvantage by the Polynesians and the Persians, Persian War, and served as a key naval base at that time. And then in 334 BC, it fell to the Macedonians under Alexander. Under Alexander. And after his death, Lysimus became master of the city and added a lot of great improvements to the city. Really built it up, made it one of the main ports in that area. Okay, so Ephesus, after that, they sided with the Antiochians of Syria, and they sided against the Romans, which was probably not a good idea at the time. They probably didn't really know, but we all know how it turned out. Rome pretty much conquered that whole area. So they did side with them, and eventually it became the Roman capital of the province of Asia. So Romans did take it over, and they made it their capital part in Asia. But they left Ephesus as a free city, and it had its own municipal government and senate and all that. So they were able to basically govern themselves, but they were still under Roman rule. This was all reported by Strabo and Josephus, who we've talked about, Josephus quite a bit, but they're historians, right? So that's kind of what was going on, or what the background is for Ephesus. All right. So now, if you want to know like the geography and stuff of it, okay, geographical positions. Ephesus was called the Queen of Asia. Okay, she was a big capital, proud people of Ionia. They were the chief harbor for the peninsula, basically there. It was an extremely wealthy and beautiful city located near the mouth of the river Castor. Okay, now it's the lower Meander area. It was the principal line of communication between Rome and eastern provinces. One of the major roads ran eastward through the pass to Sardis and then to Galatia and beyond. Another led to Magnesia and up the valley of the river of Meander to Iconium. And a third ran through Colossae and Laodicea to the Euphrates. So trade with Greece and Italy ran through that port just regularly. I mean, there was so much stuff going on at that port. I'm sure it was jam-packed all the time because people were taking it to all these different cities, stuff to buy, stuff to sell, right? All right. So moving on, the architecture in that area. Architecturally, it was pretty superb. I mean, Ephesus was a pretty beyond its time, right? So right here, you got a picture of the theater. At the time, it was 490 feet in diameter, and it held about 25,000 people. And that's according to Acts 19. So if you look in Acts 19 and talk about it, it holds a lot of people, right? So then they had something called the Marble Way. And the Marble Way was lined with statues and fountains and ran from the Temple of Artemis, or Diana, through the city to the Magnesia Gate. Okay, the Arcadia Way, another main road from the theater to the harbor, was 1,735 feet long and 70 feet wide. This was a huge road, right? People could go all over that road. I mean, that would be pretty awesome. It was pretty big. It was also lined with columns and shops, and it was illuminated at night for their nightlife and for people to shop and buy and sell and trade. And I mean, I can't even, it would be like, modern day New York. It's open all night long, all kinds of stuff to do. It was just pretty amazing for those times. The most outstanding architectural feature of this, though, was the temple. Okay, they had a temple of Diana, and, going back, Diana, daughter of Zeus, sister of Apollo, yada yada. But anyway, so they worshiped Diana at that time. The temple of Diana, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was 4 times as large as the Parthenon in Athens. Okay, so it was huge. It stood on a platform that was 425 feet by 220 feet. The building itself was 340 feet by 165 feet, and it had 120 ionic columns. Okay, each of them were like 60 feet high. It's amazing. So the bad thing is what the temple was used for in those times. I mean, it was central, sexual rites took place at the temple involving both male and female prostitution. There was all kinds of pagan worship and stuff going on. But even though its income was, very good, they were just thriving in those times until Paul showed up, right? Everybody knows Paul. Or maybe you don't, Paul the Apostle. But he shows up and he's preaching, and basically he threatened their income and their way of life by preaching the Christian gospel. So at that time, it actually led to his departure. They basically kicked him out of the city because of what he was preaching and telling them that they needed to stop doing the stuff they were doing in the temple. But among other things, the temple, it was also used as an asylum for criminals. So I'm not sure if they, had different rooms in there, that they had their little sex parties and stuff going on in one room, and then in another room they had like their pagan worship and stuff like that, and then in another room they had all these loonies and criminals locked up from the times. I don't know how that works, but they were all in that one temple. I mean, it was huge, so they could. Also, one thing about Ephesus that a lot of people don't know, the first bank functioned as it was in the temple under the chief priests. So most historians, or some historians, believe that this was the first bank in the world. It was started there in Ephesus. they had to have a lot of money to have a bank that they came up with on their own. I mean, this thing, it was a functioning bank, and I believe it was the first one in the world. So, real quick, we'll go through the New Testament period and what was going on in Ephesus at that time. So, in the New Testament period, Ephesus, it was the largest city of its day. As the harbor gradually became unstable or unusable, traffic diverted to Smyrna, and Ephesus was the center for the study of arts and magic. So there was a lot of art and magic and weird stuff going on. It was renowned the world over for its talismans, its incantations, its magic spell books, its charms, etc. If you look in Acts 19:19, it talks about the burnings. Paul's first visit was brief, remember, because he was basically kicked out and directed toward a Jewish community. But he later made a second visit. He was driven from the synagogues and settled in the school of Tyrannus for 2 years until the uproar in 58 AD. Okay, if you look in Acts 19:24-41 and 21, you will be able to read more about that if you have time. Ephesus later became the center of the missionary operations throughout Asia. Okay, so imitators followed. They followed these missionary works, but they didn't have power. Okay, if you look in Acts 19:12 and 17, it talks a little bit about that. But after Paul left Ephesus and journeyed through Macedonia, he returned to Miletus for what is now known as his famed farewell to the Ephesian elders. Timothy is allegedly to have become the first bishop there, 1 Timothy 1:3. It is here that we find Aquila, Priscilla, and Apollos. 1 Corinthians was penned during his second visit. Paul's epistle to Ephesus was written from Rome. John is said to have spent time in Ephesus with Mary. Okay, that's Jesus' mother, Mary, is who we're talking about, because he was put in charge of her, if you remember. And that's according to Eusebius and others who wrote about it. But John returned there in 95 AD after he was released from Patmos. And that also, like we talked about before and some of the other things, he was released from Patmos Island, and he spent his ending years there. His gospel was apparently written from there. His tomb is there, and they say that Mary's her home is now, they have it like a shrine there. If you ever get to Ephesus or that area, you should really go see this stuff. I would love to just see John's tomb and Mary's home. Okay, so if you heard the timer just a few seconds ago, my time is up. If anybody has any questions or anything like that, you can please feel free to let me know, talk to me. I'm on here, and I can spend, even though the 15 minutes with God is over, I can always spend more time chatting with people and answering any questions, or trying to answer questions, or at least getting some different conversations going. All right, so with that, and I don't see any questions or anything on here, we will end this session of 15 Minutes with God on Probable Cause Christianity. And I thank everybody that tuned in, and I thank everybody that watches this later. Remember, it is in the archives on YouTube on this channel, so you can always go back and watch it later. Remember to sign up for Probable Cause Christianity on the YouTube channel, and if you like my videos, please share them, share the link, give me a thumbs up, and let me know that you're watching it, and let me know that you like it. I really appreciate it. And that is all for now. Hopefully, if all goes well, I will be back next week with some more information for everybody, and we will continue on talking about the churches and Revelations in itself. God bless you all, and you all have a good evening.